Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 928 of our philosophical series, and we once more are delving into Susie Frobel and fractal time, why a watch kettle never boils. Let me go into the zest of the whole thing. It will be most interesting the more we get into it. And as I mentioned before, we are modeling our thinking. This is called projection in Henri Bergson, but it is used in modern time neurology when to understand the concept of perception. Perception is not something passive, it is constantly something entirely constructed. So there is a remnant of an idea that reality is out there and we do not construct it. It is not something coming from us, it is coming from the outside. And I mentioned in the previous lecture 927 that now we clearly starting to understand that the whole gestalt, if you like, of the world being out there actually is disease. It is shown in light Asperger, severe Asperger, all over the autism spectrum, all the way to proper autism. It is always the same. Perception is something passive, constructions are something bad, models are not good, it should be the real thing, not modeling. And I think this is an intuitive rejection of reality as such, which is the starting point of any sickness. Reality is modeling, and this natural per se or arche or as it is, that is the self-construct. Why is it so? Well, Susie Frobel tried to get into under the surface out of this disease idea, why we think models, constructions, artificiality, add-ons are something that should be evicted, and why solipsism, going into oneself, these different degrees of autism, automatic self-reflection, that seems more natural and should be the way we should go. And actually it's very similar to the philosophy of Rousseau, where he said that the non-constructed wild man, the wildling of the nature, was better in different ways. And this tendency is still today. We often admire animals because they don't act with constructs, they don't have pretenses. Go into a movie and watch Sir David Attenborough describes the animals. He used many terms as being entirely natural, having no add-ons, having no pretenses, doing exactly what comes to their instincts. They live in harmony with nature. This is not model, this is not artificiality, and all those things. I would say this is the very tendency of metaphysics, of presence. This turning away from perception, this turning away from being active in perception. Because active in perception is always constructs, is always models. It's always something coming from us that is pre-made. It does not fit any natural picture, because otherwise it wouldn't be perception. Whereas the naturalness of looking directly at oneself, and you get this ontic take, you just see reality as it is. Seeing reality as it is nothing but the loop And this is, you get the ego stamping what is perceived coming from itself, and this self-similarity, this is what Rudolf Gachet calls direct reflection. This direct reflection is a token of what is good, whereas the constructs, the artificiality, the necessary traits of the hermeneutical circle of Martin Heidegger, that we actually pre-construct things, that we model things, that we use different types of maps, and not in the sense that we map out territory, but rather in the sense that we create reality with our maps. To be very honest, maybe this is the clearest explanation of how the metaphysical presence sort of blocks out or makes perception completely impossible. It is this striving for naturalness that is often called the direct, intuitive, emotionally laden what is percept, instead of the constructed, preemptive, willed thing. And here comes the other thing that could be something to point at and have as a rule of thumb then when something has gone awry, and that is, as soon as you have this idea of there being an intention, it is also bad. Objective understanding, as it's called, I put objective into quotation marks. Objective realization doesn't have any intention, doesn't have any will, it doesn't have any interest. It is without sentiment. It is alienated or detached from interest. I think that is something especially we in Sweden can sort of understand. It is that we demand almost from the policeman he should not like to catch burglars or thieves or criminals. He should hate himself for doing that, or he should be completely objective. And also in Sweden, if you meet up bureaucracy, that person should be depersonalized. He should not have human traits. And this is also something that is very visible in news of Sweden. The journalist or news anchor usually puts on a face of complete seriousness, and this is the pretended objectivity, detachment from the subject. He wants to show that he doesn't care either or about the subject, so he is just a megaphone, loudspeaker of the proper, real, original news. Whereas he would have liked it or disliked it, he would have destroyed the news somehow. And this is an absolute rejection of participating in knowledge, because knowledge is always models. Knowledge is always constructs. Knowledge is always something preemptive. Yes, there are things coming back, but the most important trait in knowledge is we do something preemptive. That is the core of the hermeneutical circle. If you don't do anything, you don't get anything back. That's the passivity of perception. Perception is the most active thing. And to cite the now famous neurologist David Bradel. Any idea of passivity in perception kills off perception. It's the most active principle, and it takes the most decisions, and all those decisions must be taken from your own side. Should not ever be a pretense of looking for some sort of objectivity or something more real than reality itself. Those ideas directly kill off perception. Those are killers of perception. Perceptions are models, nothing else. So this is another way of going about the thing than we earlier met upon when it comes to Susie Froebel. Before, she talked about fractality, the impossibility of the very idea of true nature, true reality that is unfractal and it doesn't need any interactive. This way of looking at it, passivity, it's very similar to the football game you can see here. Either you can sort of participate in the football game, or you can choose not to participate. The level of participation makes for the game. The same goes for perception. If you're not actively want to perceive, if you don't have your personal, very personal, emotionally laden, originating from you yourself and nobody else, you will not have perception. It's easy as that. And the more you can put whatever it is yourself, your energy, your gain is incredibly important. What do you gain with your perception? Every idea of non-gainage are really bad for perception because it blocks out perception. It's an active process. And trust me, if you take this footballer like Cruyff, or why not Roger Federer that we have discussed before. Maybe Cruyff is the best example. He did everything for money, and by doing everything for money he did also everything for sports. Trying to take them away destroys the natural of wanting to play the game as well as gaining money. Both disappears at the same time. And I think Cruyff also said that at times. He's the most loved footballer in Dutch history, and that is mainly because he put so much into the naturalness of the game, and that came from his own intention wanting to win money, gain money. And that is a very important thing. Especially Greek influence said we should do things for their objective purpose. Maybe they did not say we should never do anything for not gaining, but the idea of an objective action, this logocentric idea, is swept into Judaism and Christianity and Islam and made people force themselves out of any gain in things. Giving money to others should not be something you can gain from, which is absolutely ridiculous because that kills off naturalness. We are naturally wanting to gain things. The models are naturally coming from us in some respect. And making a division between gain in one hand, like for instance I want to gain something with my acts, and the naturalness of the act, like the pure giving, is absolutely ridiculous and is disastrous to the act, because it's a division that excludes on the behalf of the wholeness, and this exclusion makes the naturalness go away as well as the gain wanting, and both disappear at the very same time. And that goes for the Swedish police force. Not wanting to catch burglars, of course, takes down their work ethic as well, make them less uh, inclined to do their job well, and also less inclined to be altruistic in their acts, humane or considerate. Every type of exclusion. I think the best example is Mother Teresa, who was forced only to act in some sort of non-interest, not for her own sake, but for something else, something that God would never have ever wanted anyone from doing. That's an Hellenistic take. That's Apollo speaking possibly, but not the Christian God. That took away her naturalness and made her disbelief in God. And that also made her act something less than natural. That can only be natural if your gainage is part of the whole thing. Division is prioritizing one part of the thing and marginalizing the other thing. And it means, as I said so many times before, that the part that gets marginalized is the one that is parasitic on the other one, and both are losing force. And that happens instantaneous in the very act of division. It doesn't take any time, it happens directly. We were talking about pretension, that is having different takes on reality before the very fact as coming to action. And one can see it as a pre-take that thrust forward, where you anticipate something strongly, you construct something strongly, you see it before it happens. That is very necessary. It doesn't come to you directly, you see it before it happens, and all this thrust is projected forward. This forward thrust is the direction also. You direct it upwards or onwards, it goes into the very action, and in this thrust you also get something back, and that's the retention. And retention doesn't go the other way, it actually goes forward as well. Both are acts that sort of singly diverts, and they could also converge. But in this act of retention and pretension, we get awareness. We get awareness when we consciously, from our own perspective, for all our different gains that we put into this, actively try to future. Future doesn't come by itself, it only comes when you actively do that. And then you get retention and you have this awareness. Whereas the other way of going about things, what I call the rumination into the future, when you do the old thinking, you recast those, put them in different boxes, you rearrange them, and you think, so should the future be. That's the absolute opposite in many ways. That's the passive take, and you wait for the future to come to you. That is living in unreality. This is the self-construct. Rudolf Cachet clearly shows all waiting for reality, all not actively participating in reality, all gainless experience that he expresses this. Everything that doesn't have a gain is in itself a passive act, because only the gain can make you perceive. And I think in many ways that is absolutely self-obvious. And the modern man, with his sitting position like that, oddly enough, feel in this torturous situation happy. There is no happiness coming from that, and there is no reality either. It is this self-construct that we have become accustomed to see as reality. The sheer randomness that we go out to find, and we get surprised. I find the same as everyone else. That is the criticism of private language. Just it is the same as everyone else is the absolute proof it's not reality. Then each and other person has a different take on reality, and we cannot even communicate that reality to ourselves. that is proven by the hermeneutical circle. Absolute proof of there not being a reality is that many different people experience the same thing. So you see here how we sort of play in the same concert, but the tune that's coming out we cannot even hear, but we go into some certain rhythm, but we are all in a bad way, completely subjective, emotionalized in this random reality, and that we say it's real, give the stamp of real because it's random and it's shared by other people. We think it's shared by other people. It's shared by other people because of the private language. Number one argument that I would say is the box with the beep in it. So that is the case when it comes to classical physics. In classical physics, the main idea is self-simulacrum. We construct our own world. Newton did that himself. His reality, so to speak, apart from his constructions, which is nothing to do with reality, that's working principles. But they created reality in the Principia. He also wanted to build a world structure. But all those things, his time, space, and knowledge, are all self-construct. They could not be shared by anyone. And that was one of the counter-arguments from Cruyff and Berkeley, that this can never ever be shared by anyone. Your reality is only for yourself. And Wittgenstein could have added hurt to injury by saying, not even you, Newton, would have known what you meant by time, space, and knowledge in your dissertation, Principia. That must be clearly separated from the mechanical principle we did, because in the hand movement it can be transferred, but that has nothing to do with reality as such. Just like a spinning jack or a spinning jenny or a sewing machine or a diesel engine or a why not Butler carburetor or nuclear machine or whatever you have. They can never ever be shared in any way. So the model Newton made is an linguistic critique. And that is also the interesting information from Ian McGilchrist. Persons that begin to suffering mental diseases of different kinds, they all have the same idea of reality. And they can sit in the same room and sort of share this reality. That never happens with a construct of reality. That is never shared in that way. It's shared in the movement, but not in the way to sit down and share reality by talking or transferring in some way, trying to transfer reality. And they often have this idea of self-similarity, often have this idea of the world being out of themselves, outside of themselves. And they have this typical deranged bodily movement that are very ungainly. They are not coordinated in a good way. They seem very energy lacking, and it's like the body tries not to perceive, it tries not to understand, it shuts itself down. This thing only means one thing for the body: I will not take in the world because all the information comes this way. And this is also the reflective consciousness of Richard E. Lind. This is shutting out of reality. This is not wanting to feel. And it could be pain, it could be pleasure, it doesn't matter. It becomes a habit. And once you are sort of cut of reality, you don't feel anything. And you cannot share any reality with anyone else. You will not walk in the same rhythm. You will have this fact of trains not going in time in the West, whereas the people who are more directed to the exogenous and the endogenous at the same time, you get trains that go in time. So be very careful when people say that reality is based on different people perceiving the same thing. That's the absolute indication you are self-constructed. And you have people in the box, and whenever you mention time or mass or whatever Newtonian factor you mention, that is something only you can understand and no one else. And oddly enough, that counter-argument already came in the early 18th century from Bishop Berkeley and the inventor of the pendulum clock. I lost his name now. He's coming back to me. Well, I say thank you very much. It's crowded enough here, and wish you all a very good evening. Bye bye for now.